Aye. Don't you? Aw. Hee hee. Cute Leslie. Everybody's hanging out in the back right now. Ryan, that was funny. That was Rick that tweeted back to you, actually. That was not me. Yeah. It's like, just responded to Ryan. What's up? I would love to get rid of those for you. Right here, look.
Couldn't find it. Seems behind
Also,
the desk.
I've
It's like
thus far resisted. Zero taffy.
zero taffy.
Zero.
I do like 10 to 12 a day.
Real
That's
life.
like my average.
What, 10 to 12 a day?
Yeah.
It's pretty good.
That's pretty bad.
I mean, last session I went crazy.
We only have one dentist, I think, in the Senate.
The day that I have one, after that I'm gone. So I'm just trying to do my best.
It's a real asset.
Yeah.
What is that, Prelude?
What?
You have one Prelude and
Yeah. That's how all
Blue.
work for me. Honest to goodness.
And so they want you to sit one, the
Nope,
strips of
have to
the,
reevaluate. Start to do over. Really? Oh. Good for her. She's probably
She's like in the 20s.
every day.
Who's that?
I don't have confirmation. Jessica.
Jessica Gal?
Yeah.
The legend.
Rick might know.
The woman, the myth, the legend.
That was one of the background. Jessica Gale. How much happy did she have every day?
She said
I heard that it was a lot from Brian.
heard.
I've heard by several accounts. She could eat up to 3.
Up to 3.
Average 10 to 12.
Don't know where that one
since I've eaten zero,
Also 0.
0. Wow.
0. Yeah. Nice. Stay strong.
no
Let's stay
freebies,
strong together.
no freebies.
You guys should get like bracelets.
So strong.
Live strong.
Taffy strong.
Taffy strong.
Tia. Tia. Crew.
Who do we need? Anybody special?
Just regular friend.
Maine,
Jim Davis
probably.
would be helpful.
Okay, yeah, with the girl,
Rick, are you wearing a vest today?
Say what?
Are you wearing a vest?
Yeah. There's a knife fight scheduled for 4:30.
as long as it's not a cockfight.
Not a cockfight.
Hey, Richard. That's Richard.
It's probably for me, actually. Hello. Oh, is it? Okay, thanks. Caught you hopping over that thing on the video. That was awesome. Yeah, it was good. Then you went like this after? It was good. Really? That's cool. She's the coolest kid on the playground. We've already had 2 text questions, or 2 tweet questions and a text question too. No. I haven't even looked at what it's on.
Let me guess what they're on.
I don't think they're on what you think they're on. Okay. Let's get some door shuts. Hold on just a second. Can you shut that door, Nicole? Oh, until you're something. All right, let's go.
Okay. Welcome to the Utah Senate Legislative Update. We're just gotten off the floor. We're back from our 3-day weekend celebrating Washington Lincoln holiday, as it's officially called here in Utah. I guess we'll just go ahead and open it for questions. Bob?
The House Republican caucus today is going to take up Medicaid expansion, and they're going to have a presentation by Dunnigan and Santee. I guess they have a plan. Where's the Senate on Medicaid expansion?
Well, we've had some caucus discussions on that issue. Senator Okerlund, do you want to maybe give them an update on?
Yeah, we're just not there yet. I think we've looked at a lot of options, and we'll continue to. We're interested in what the House puts forward, but we are scheduling our next caucus next Thursday again to deal with Medicaid issues again, and think that we're getting close to maybe something that we can get behind. We're hoping that we can get our caucus there, but we're just not there yet.
Is it the same plan as the Dunnigan-Santee plan?
Well, there isn't a plan really that we are trying to coalesce behind at this point. We're still just looking at 3 or 4 different ideas. There may be something very similar, maybe something a little bit different, but we've looked at the committee's recommendations, the task force recommendations, and others, and so it'll take another good long day for us, I think, maybe to get an idea.
Mr. President, if I may
Yes.
add, just from the Senate Minority Caucus, we've had conversations with the governor, and also just understanding since the bill we passed last year, there is now an involvement of the legislature through this process, but we are confident that the task force did their work and their due diligence to bring some options that may be more feasible for the state, and we're certainly looking forward to hearing where the Senate Majority Caucus is, and we really want to see that Medicaid expansion happen, whether it's through any of those 3 options that were brought by the task force or the full Medicaid expansion, which would be my personal favorable. But we know that may not be possible, but we really think it's critical, and we're excited that the Majority Caucus continues to have those conversations.
Any other discussions on Medicaid expansion? So what do we have from our texting audience?
Got a lot today. Okay, we'll start out with tweets. Senators, what are your thoughts on the Count My Vote initiative, and are you optimistic about SB 54?
Let's see, Senator Bramble. Can we defer that question until we get Senator Bramble in here?
Yes,
he
absolutely.
can address that.
How about this one from Jeremy Roberts? Why are we considering collecting DNA from people accused of crimes? Are we no longer considered innocent until proven guilty?
You familiar with that, Senator Hoyt?
It's a House bill, so we don't know where it's going to go and what they're doing. If I understand the argument correctly, a lot of times when people get picked up for criminal behavior, having a DNA would give us back to a database to find out the many unsolved crimes where they do have DNA and be able to find those. Currently, we do it for the more serious offenders, and the question is, do we want to do it for the less offenders? Is it worth the cost, worth the infringement of personal rights? And I haven't had a chance to read the bill or debate the policy, but I'll wait first until it passes the House before we get involved in the Senate.
Okay, we had a text question, actually a Twitter question. Would you want to repeat that?
Yes. What are your thoughts on the Count My Vote initiative, and are you optimistic about SB 54?
Senator Bramble?
Well, first of all, we wouldn't be talking election reform, nominating reforms at the level that we are without Count My Vote having pursued their agenda. I'm concerned with the Count My Vote agenda. I don't believe that simply moving to direct primaries will increase citizen participation. And it was citizen participation that was the stated intent of election reforms. I've asked the National Conference of State Legislatures, I serve as their National Vice President, I've asked them to provide, as soon as they can, data on not only the voter turnout, but drilling down a little bit deeper, because it appears that most states that have a single party dominance and that have direct primaries, that their voter participation, Utah is in the middle of that pack. It doesn't look like making this change would increase voter participation. So we came forward with a proposal based on the negotiations between Count My Vote and the Republican Party. But it didn't stop there with just the two items that Count My Vote was asking for. Senate Bill 54 goes further towards citizen participation. So if the objective is truly making greater opportunities for citizens to participate in the process, I believe Senate Bill 54 goes much further in that direction than simply going to a direct primary. So what do I think? I think that it's we have a process. The process is both the citizens' initiatives and the legislature. There is no guarantee that Count My Vote will have the signatures, or if they get the signatures, that the initiative would pass in November. There's broad support for reform in our process. That's why I brought forward the bill, and thus far there's been widespread acceptance in the legislature.
And outside the legislature, I know there's been, I read in the paper over the weekend, I think LeVar Webb and Frank Pignanelli weighed in on this issue. So there's, I think, some very positive comments on us addressing this and doing so in a very public and deliberative way.
Now, we did, as, I don't know, President, if you've mentioned this, I made a motion today on the floor to have a time certain on the debate for Senate Bill 54 on Thursday morning at 11 o'clock. Last week, when I was in this room in this press conference, or press availability, there was a press release from Count My Vote. They didn't show up at the committee. They didn't weigh in. They claimed in a quote in the media that they didn't because we wouldn't have changed anything to begin with. The facts are that last October, I met with the principals of Count My Vote, asked them to join me in crafting a compromise piece of legislation that I believe the legislature would pass. They declined then. They declined to come to the committee. They then claimed that somehow Senate Bill 54 was akin to House Bill 477. The Grandma debacle that came up late in the session was rushed through, and that no one had a chance to weigh in, to debate, to contemplate the provisions. This concept was first reported in the media last October. There have been numerous media articles between then and now. Senate Bill 54 was actually released publicly the first part of February. It's been out for at least 2 weeks. It passed unanimously in committee after appropriate public notice. And now we're giving the public notice of when the debate will be on the floor of the Senate so that they'll have a chance to tune in, to come up, to weigh in. Because we are very anxious to have the greatest level of transparency on this issue that we can.
Any other questions on this issue?
Will the convention threshold, will that be adjusted on the floor, you believe, on Thursday?
Mr. Hissman, there's a process up here. Any legislator can propose any amendment. I've made the case for why those 4 provisions will increase voter participation. Today there was an article that said that these don't go far enough and that the people want something more, and yet the very author of that was supporting Count My Vote's proposed settlement with the Republican Party that didn't go nearly as far as 54. So this seems to be somewhat situational.
So there, I assume you could expect there to be an amendment. maybe with that.
Our process allows any legislator to offer any amendment, and then we have a debate on it.
But we don't know of anybody that's planning on it this time, but we don't know.
Senator Valentine mentioned a potential amendment in committee. My plan is to resist amendments to the bill, although I understand that there is some concern about the 2-day window. There may be some consideration of having absentee voting at the caucus and a 2-day window, but having that 2-day window be 2 days leading up to caucus night rather than after the full slate of delegate nominees is identified. So you could have early voting and still have nominations from the floor. There's been some in the Republican Party that have requested an amendment of that nature. But that's going to be our process, to have a very thorough, robust, and very public debate of our electoral process. And to those who say that the legislature shouldn't be creating laws about how we get elected, all election provisions currently exist in state statute. They're the product of the legislative process.
Well, the easiest process for me as an incumbent would be to go to a straight primary.
Well, I mentioned this last week.
That'd be the easiest, but I don't believe in that. I believe that it ought to be hard. I believe that I ought to face some hard questions, and that process is through the convention system.
You know, it's ironic, President. Folks that support Count My Vote are accusing Senate Bill 54 of being incumbent protectionism. Folks that oppose Count My Vote claim that Count My Vote is incumbent protectionism. So you've got folks saying 54 is protectionism and Count My Vote is protectionism for incumbents. In my own case, if the provisions of 54 were in place as early as 2004, I would have been in a primary in 2004, 2008, and 2012. As an incumbent, I concur. I believe that an open primary, a direct primary in my district would be probably easier than some of the battles I've had in my own re-election within the Republican Party, based on immigration and some of our other policy considerations.
It's easier for me to raise money. I have name recognition in my Senate district. A direct primary empowers that. It doesn't. I've been through this process a number of times and recognize over the years that having a convention system where you really have to get down and meet the people, it gives the common person an opportunity to run. You know, I hate to see that being done away with.
I'd like to mention one other thing that is troubling on this whole process. When Count My Vote held their town hall meetings throughout the state, they were proposing something far different than what's in the initiative. They were proposing a dual track. Keep the caucus convention system, have an alternative path to the ballot. That's not what the initiative is. Throughout our law, throughout our code, there are many provisions where in statute we say this is an exclusive remedy. For example, if you're injured in the workplace and that your employer has workers' compensation coverage, the sole remedy is workers' compensation, and we have that in tax law. And throughout our code, there are areas where the statutorily there is an exclusive remedy or an exclusive alternative. If Count My Vote had intended there to be no other alternative, they could have put that in their initiative, and they chose not to. If they wanted an alternative path to the ballot, they had a great debate, but what they told me last week in a meeting in my office, or in a meeting in the Senate Rules Room, was that their donors demanded something different. Not what the people are wanting, but what their donors were demanding. So this notion that somehow 54 is circumventing their will, somehow it's undermining the will, they could have drafted their initiative differently that would have precluded the legislature being able to provide any alternative, and they chose not to.
So, Senator Maine, have you had any discussions on this in your caucus? And
I think we buried. I think everyone has chosen their poison. But what interests me was Senator Bramble came to me several months ago, and the component that I liked, he had an internet component. And I think we need to be looking at that because our machines cannot be fixed and we can't buy machines anymore. So we've got to do something to make sure that people can vote. Internet voting by mail is great. We need to reach out. People should be able to vote easily. It shouldn't be an issue because with time schedules, people working late, sick children, all those things come into play on voting day. So I think we need to use any instrument to make sure people can vote. It's their right to vote.
And I'll just say affordability is a big issue, and I think SB 54 moves towards the average citizen to be able to participate. Going to a primary, I'm not sure I will be sitting, I mean, just realistically, who can actually go directly to a primary? But there's obviously things that we need to change, and I think people in Utah are saying they need something, so a solution that is able to combine everything is the way, to me personally, the right approach. But as Senator Main expressed, we are a small caucus, but we have different opinions, and I think you're going to see some of those expressed through the conversation. But personally, I feel better to see a hybrid, solution to the concerns of accessing caucus nights. I mean, if it's one night and something may happen, I mean, the internet component, the 2-day component helps. But the idea that just jumping to a primary, I'm not sure who can afford a primary.
On the notion of online, there are 2 other bills that haven't been on your radar screen yet, and a discussion for the interim that hasn't been on the radar screen, and that is the online voting. There are 2 bills. Currently, we have online voting. It's limited for military ADA. That will be expanded at the request of the Elections Office. I'm carrying that bill, and a new representative, Representative Cox, will be the House sponsor. Then Representative Cox is bringing forward a bill for online voting for the presidential primary in 2016 as a test run for online voting being expanded more generally in our electoral process. That was part of the original concept when I spoke with the folks with Count My Vote, but it was too complex to put that in Senate Bill 54, so we have 2 companion bills on online voting. And then Representative Rebecca Chavez-Houck and I will be bringing forward further discussion on using technology for initiative signatures this interim. So those components are out there as well.
So any other questions on this issue?
You mentioned Utah's kind of in the middle of the pack when it comes to voter turnout with all the states that are heavily dominated by one party. I'm wondering, is it about that, or is it more about just open access, having better access to candidates earlier in the process? Is that more the point of Count My Vote?
You'd have to ask Count My Vote. The reality is today, any qualified citizen can file for office. They can file as an unaffiliated voter. It takes 1,000 signatures to get on a ballot in a statewide race. As an unaffiliated voter, it takes 300 signatures for a legislative seat. That is open access to the ballot for anyone that chooses to file for office if they meet the constitutional requirements. And any citizen that is a registered voter would have the ability to vote for that individual. That's not what this debate is about. This debate is about whether an individual can place their name on the ballot, identified as a party candidate, without having had any interaction with the party's requirements to carry the party banner going into the election. That's what this is about. It's not about open access. We already have that. Without the initiative and without Senate Bill 54, any qualified citizen qualified under the Constitution for office based on age and residency and other requirements can file for office. They would be an unaffiliated voter in the general election, but if they want to carry the banner of party affiliation, that's the question here. What level of involvement should the party have in that process? And frankly, it would appear that Count My Vote is trying to circumvent any party interaction at all. They're claiming some right to run with party affiliation without meeting any of the criteria that the party would impose.
Could you comment on...
We'll take one more question, so this will be it.
On the contention that Count My Vote would lead away from the extremes, that caucus system helps more right-wing or more left-wing people be elected?
Well, John Huntsman came out of the caucus system, and he was one of the most moderates during that cycle. And you can go down the list. Nolan Karras came out of that cycle. You can look at historically, that's a difficult case to make, but one of the concerns about the direct primary, Lee, is plurality. If you have a fringe candidate that has a very strong following of 10 or 15 or 20% of the electorate, and by the way, Count My Vote does nothing to allow unaffiliated voters to vote in a primary. Senate Bill 54 does. But there's a concern if you had 10 candidates, and we've seen 10 candidates in the congressional races, in the governor's race, if you had one more extreme candidate, but they had a very strong following, you can actually make the case that a direct primary could likely, through plurality, give rise to that more extreme candidate surviving the primary, because they have a much more passionate base, albeit a smaller base, and the other candidate splitting the more mainstream vote. We've seen that in other states.
Let's let the senators get to caucus.
I want to add just one. I want to apologize for a mistake I made last meeting. I told you that I would get you the number of the amount we exceeded, and I didn't get it until last night, so I didn't send it to you. I apologize. And number two, I was wrong. I said I thought it was between 500 and 700 million. It was over $800 million in prioritizations by our committees against what money we have. That's not going to request. That's what they actually prioritized. It was over 800 million.
Okay, thanks.
Audio shut up. Are we still streaming?
Yep, I'm gonna stop it. Apparently it paused a couple times during the broadcast.
I got the text.
Yeah.
Keep it streaming until the room starts clearing out. I think it's interesting for people to watch. Just mute the audio.